Hi folks, I'm Chris Marshall with Woodworkers Journal magazine. In our February 2017 print issue, Charles Mack shows us 6 different methods for cutting circles. And probably the most unusual method of all involves this panel cutting jig that you can make yourself and an ordinary blade in your table saw to cut perfectly round circles like these. I've given his method a try and found it to be simple and safe. And here's how to do it. To make the panel cutting jig, start by attaching a hardwood runner that fits your table saw's miter slot to a piece of plywood or MDF. Make this panel around 20 inches square and position the runner so the panel will overhang the blade about ½ an inch or so. I've also added a cleat along the back edge for easier handling on the saw. Then run the jig past the blade to trim off the overhanging edge. Now draw a line across the panel that's perpendicular to the blade and about halfway along the length of the panel. This is where you're going to set the radii of the circles you want to cut. You're also going to need a pivot point for those circles, and I'm going to use a portion of a 16D finish nail for that. So let's go ahead and cut a circle with a 14-inch diameter. I've already drawn that circle with its edge touching the edge of this MDF scrap, and I've drilled a hole at the center point for my pivot nail. I've also marked my panel jig at 7 inches to set the radius, and I've drilled a 5/8 inch deep hole there that fits my pivot nail tightly. Fit the workpiece onto the pivot pin. Now make sure it rotates freely and that the pivot pin remains securely in place on the jig. Here's how the circle cutting process works. First, we're going to turn this square into an octagon by cutting off the 4 big corners. Just rotate the scrap so a corner overhangs the jig, hold the workpiece down against the jig and cut off the corner. Rotate to the next corner and do the same thing. Trim off all 4 corners. And now you've got an octagon, and it's time to trim these 8 corners off just like you did the first 4. Just rotate and trim over and over again. And now you've got a 16-sided polygon. So, you guessed it, time to trim these 16 corners off to make a 32-sided figure. By now, you've got the gist of this. The more corners you cut off, the smaller these line segments get, and the closer the polygon is to a circular shape. And at this point, I'm going to take this, the final trimming step, and make all these little corners go away. Here's how. Set the jig so the radius line is just past the front edge of the blade and stop it here. I'm stopping my jig against a magnetic featherboard so it won't move. Now install the workpiece, start the saw, and slowly rotate the workpiece, feeding it clockwise into the blade. Trim the circle all the way around. Now this last trimming cut should give you a perfectly round circle with nice smooth edges. Now if you get some burning, what I found out is back your panel jig up a little bit or move it forward a little bit and reset your stop block and keep on trimming to clean that up. There might be faster ways to cut circles than this, but I think it's an interesting example of how a table saw in a careful and controlled setup can actually allow you to cut circles. So Charles Mack, thanks for showing it to us, and viewers, thanks for watching.